Hey there friends, and welcome back to my channel. This video is going to be all about how to get over a reading slump. These are some tips that I've heard before or that I've kind of jotted down every time that I have gotten out of a reading slump, and I'm currently in a reading slump right now. So hopefully some of these tips can help me get back to tackling my TBR a little bit better, because it is really stacking up and I'm getting overwhelmed, and I have some good things to read, but I don't know, lately I've just really not had the focus to read. Like, I want to read. Other times when I've gotten into a reading slump, I have like no desire to read, but right now I have a desire to read, but I just don't have the focus. Like, every time I sit down to read a book, I like lose focus or like get distracted by something else and I end up not reading. So I have been reading a lot of like nonfiction books, so I feel like that hasn't really affected that, but for some reason with fiction right now, it's just not grabbing my attention. So hopefully if you're also in a reading slump, we can get out of it together. But yeah, I hope that at least one of these tips might be able to help you, so I'll go ahead and get into the first one. So my first tip would be to read a book that has a corresponding movie to it. And so like read the first chapter of the book and then start watching the movie and pause the movie at the point where chapter 1 ends, and then continue, then read chapter 2 and then watch the movie, read chapter 3, and so on and so forth. That's kind of what I'm doing with this book right here. This is the book I'm currently reading. This is The Maze Runner, and I have already watched the first Maze Runner movie and I loved it, so I was like, let me pick up the books. So I did, and I started reading it, and after chapter 1 I went back and watched the movie up to where like chapter 1 ends storyline wise. So I feel like that's a fun way to get through a book and kind of helps you visualize things, especially with stories like this, like more like dystopian and maybe even like fantasy, like kind of hard to visualize stories. I feel like that might be a helpful way to get through those books. So yeah, that's kind of one that I'm putting into practice right now, and the first tip I'm giving you guys. The second tip that I have is to pick a new place to read. I feel like sometimes we might, at least for me, I tend to get tired of like sitting in the same spot for like months on end to read. So even if it's like you bring a book to like a coffee shop or like Barnes and Noble or something and you sit and read there for a little bit and just get out of the house, maybe that's what you need. That might be helpful. Even finding or making like a new reading nook in your living space might help. Just gather lots of pillows, get something super comfy. For me, I can't be too comfortable when I read because I will fall asleep. So even if I'm doing something that I really enjoy, if I'm in a comfortable, like a way too comfortable spot, I will fall asleep. So yeah, just find what works for you. Light some candles, have a coffee next to you. Yeah, I feel like those are all just like helpful things, and I enjoy reading a lot more when I kind of have a better setup for myself. So yeah, that's the second one. The next tip would be to create a book club with your friends. Let's say for the month of October, you're going to read the Hunger Games book, the first book, and each week you all have a responsibility to read the first 3 chapters, like 3 chapters a week. That's just an example. And every Friday, let's say you guys have a discussion about what is going on so far. So kind of breaking a book up that way and having other people to talk about it with, I think would be helpful. Accountability, having people that are like kind of keeping me accountable and we're all doing the same thing, helps me. So if that is also something that works for you, you can try out this tip, and it should be just like another fun thing to do with your friends. So I would definitely recommend this one. The next tip would be to reread an old favorite. So this is actually the method that got me out of my last reading slump. I was just feeling very overwhelmed with the amount of new books that I had to read. And so I was like, you know, I really want to read, but I don't know, I don't feel like jumping into a new story right now. So I just picked up an old favorite book and I started reading that. And it helped me get back into reading because, I don't know, that sometimes while, you know, having a new story to read and getting to the end of the book, that's like the fun of reading. Sometimes, like, if I have so many stories to read, it can get a little bit, like, I don't know, overwhelming in my head. I don't even know if I'm putting that into words correctly. Like, it makes sense in my mind, but I don't know if what I'm saying is, like, articulating it well. But yeah, I think if you just, like, find comfort in reading again by rereading an old favorite, I feel like that might rekindle that reading fire in you. So kind of on the flip side of that tip, would be to buy a new book that you're really excited about. Like, if you have a book on your wish list that you have really been wanting to read, but you're like, oh, I have all of these books that I have to read, this maybe is a little bit of a irresponsible tip, but I feel like it might help. Yeah, just finding a book, if there's one on your wish list, or even if you just walk into Barnes & Noble and start reading like the backs of some books and you find one that really excites you, pick that one up and start reading. Because I feel like, at least for me, I picked up a lot of books at once and I was genuinely excited about all of them at the time I bought them, and then they just kind of got put to the side, and now I'm feeling less motivated to read all of them. So I feel like if that has also happened to you, maybe you just need to make this one exception and go out and buy a new book and start reading it, and that eventually will hopefully turn into you reading all the books you bought in the past. So kind of opposite tips there, but I hopefully like one of them will help you. Then the next one would be to try a new genre. Typically we like to stay very, you know, in a certain genre that we like, or a certain few. For me, that's like mysteries, like murder mysteries in particular. You guys know I love me a good murder mystery. Or like dystopian, like murder mysteries and like dystopian world stories are like my favorites. And so I tend to really stick within those two genres. And so I feel like sometimes we can box ourselves, you know, in too much. And after a certain while, we can hear so many murder mysteries by the time we kind of like catch on to the themes of them. And, you know, even the same thing with like dystopian, I feel like those can be pretty predictable, especially since they tend to be for like younger audiences. I don't care, I will read any book. I don't care what age range it was made for. And yeah, I feel like maybe trying something new maybe out of your comfort zone will be a good way to get you back into reading, because you don't know what to expect. And so if you kind of like a little bit of an adventure, this one might be helpful for you. This next one might be for those of you who are very, very busy and want to read, but by the end of the day, you're just too tired to even pick up a book. I have definitely kind of been there. So you might want to try an audiobook. For me personally, I have not been able to really get into audiobooks. I have tried multiple times and I just don't prefer them personally, but I know for a lot of people, they really enjoy audiobooks. So that might be something that you would want to look into. Some people don't consider that reading. Technically it isn't, but if you are just at that point where you can't even pick up a book, or your like eyes are tired by the end of the day. Sometimes I have really bad vision, and so by the end of the day my eyes might be really, really tired and I just don't want to be looking at a book. So sometimes that's when I try an audiobook again. So I feel like that might be a helpful one for you. The next one would be to watch reading vlogs and book recommendation videos. Really kind of lean into YouTube for that, and hopefully that will get you excited to read again. I know for me that has helped in the past. Sometimes, like even with my other hobbies, like I'll watch like crochet vlogs. I love crocheting. And sometimes I don't know what I want to make, or I'm just kind of like in a slump with that hobby as well. And I watch vlogs of people crocheting or reading, and I see them and I'm like, that inspires me. I'm like, okay, like I really want to get into this again. So let me just pick something up and just get started on it. So I feel like that might also help for some of you. So that's a fun one. Next, I think this one is personally fun, and for those of you who also like to organize, maybe take all of your books out, like on the weekend, take all of your books out and reorganize them depending on how you have yours arranged. I kind of have my books arranged by genre, and then from there alphabetically by the publisher. So by the publisher or the author? I think by the publisher. So that might be a fun way to kind of like get you excited to read again. Another thing that I kind of put into place, and you can kind of see it here, I'll show some clips of my other shelves as well, but on the books that I haven't read, I have the pages turned outwards. So that's kind of like a visual cue for me when I look at my shelves, because I'm always looking at my shelves. It's kind of like a visual cue, like, oh, I haven't read that book, so I should go and grab it, and by the time I get to put it back on that shelf, it's going to be turned on the spine and I can see the title. So that's kind of like a fun tip, and it's also, I kind of like how it looks, so that's a fun one. The last tip would be, it's kind of two tips and they contradict themselves a bit. It just depends on what works for you, but really I would say just don't force yourself to read. If you're just in a season where you're really, maybe you just need to take a break from reading, and that's what it is. Just don't force yourself. Sometimes when we force ourselves to do some things, it's can push us in the opposite direction. So yeah, I mean, if sometimes it has worked for me in the past where maybe I just needed to force myself to read a chapter or two a day, and that has gotten me back into reading. But there are some times when I just needed to back off, like when I took my break from posting, just a season where I needed to back off and just take a break. And yeah, so that might be helpful, whichever one you needed to try out. Maybe you need to try out both, but in general I would say just don't force yourself. It is supposed to be something fun and relaxing, so putting so much pressure on yourself to like, okay, I need to read, like I need to read because I have this goal in mind, and it's great to set goals. I'm definitely a goal setter myself, so I definitely get that, but sometimes we just need to take the pressure off because it's supposed to be something that we enjoy. So yeah, anyways, I hope that you found at least one of these tips that might be helpful for you. And yeah, hopefully we can get back to reading. I hope that by the end of this month I'm kind of back into you know, really reading, because there are some books that I really want to get tackled. For instance, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the new book in the like Hunger Games franchise. I really want to read that because the movie is coming out in October, November, I can't remember, one of the two, and I really want to read the book before I watch the movies. So that one I'm probably going to start after I read The Maze Runner, so we'll see how it goes. But it should be fun. Hopefully I get out of this reading slump and I will have a lot of reading vlogs coming up for you guys. So yeah, anyways, I thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I hope you are having an amazing Friday or whatever day you're watching this on. I hope you are doing well, and I will see you next week. Bye guys.